After 13 rounds of the candidate tournament, of course, we had a winner, Ian Nepomniachtchi. But there was still one round to play, so what would happen? Lots of people predicting 4 colourless draws, but that was not the case. And I'd like to show you the game between Ding Liren and Nepomniachtchi. Let's see what happened. This was a very exciting game. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. There'll be more quality videos coming your way after this tournament is over. And if you've enjoyed our coverage, then do consider supporting us via PayPal or Patreon. So we know that Jan is a great exponent of the Grunfeld, and no doubt he would be booked up to the nines with that. So Ding plays what's become known as an anti-Grunfeld system. So White wants to play e4 and get a kind of Zamish King's Indian. And here, if Black plays d5, now Nepo did not play this, then this line actually has a pretty good reputation for White. It's very, very dangerous. Normally White plays Queen d2 and castles queenside, and Ding has a lot of experience with that line as White. So no doubt, yeah, he was hoping for those lines. But Nepo played pawn to e6. So this is one of the kind of approved lines against this, or a line to kind of complicate matters. And this goes into, well, a kind of Benoni setup. But there is a difference, that this knight has not moved to c3 yet. And that gives White an extra option. So here, instead of the normal knight bc3, knight ec3 from Ding. And this is quite a well-known idea, that you use the king's knight here, because White reserves the other knight to go perhaps via a3, perhaps via d2 to the c4 square. If you compare with how the knights would be here, you can see they tread on each other's toes. That's the problem. And it's a long way to get to that crucial c4 square. So that's why knight ec3 was played. It's a little finesse and well known in this kind of position. a6. Nepo wants to push with b5, so that's shut down straight away. And now, very, very interesting, Nepo doesn't castle, but instead goes for an attack straight away. This is fascinating. So the knight makes room for the queen, also makes room for that bishop, and sometimes makes room for the f-pawn as well. This is great fun. So already queen h4 check threatened. So White castles. And now again, Nepo just goes for it. Bishop d4 check. King goes in the corner. Now it's getting to that position where it's kind of almost mate immediately. If only we could play knight g3 and play, well, cheat and play the queen to h5 instead of h4. That would be mate. But that's kind of what Black is aiming for. In fact, well, Nepo played here knight e5. Queen h4 threatening mate in 1 is interesting. White should play queen e1 defending. And, well, that endgame is playable for both sides. But Nepo wanted to keep the queens on, and that feels absolutely right in this kind of position. So the knight heading forwards and looking at that bishop. And now, if that bishop retreats, then g5 stops f4, but also prepares that queen maneuver. And, I mean, it's incredibly basic. Really blunt attacking play, but once that queen reaches h6, then this simple mating idea with knight g3 and queen h6, well, it's on basically, and not easy to stop. So Ding played, after this knight e5 move, knight e2. He wants to eliminate that bishop, but also, you know, he's covering that g3 square as well. And here it is quite possible for Black just to take that bishop and then run the bishop back to g7. So it's a double-edged position. You can say, well, I've got that bishop, and, you know, maybe you castle and go for f5 later. But Nepo played consistently with queen h4, it's really, really dangerous. So Ding, after, well, 13 minutes, took that bishop. And here, you know, there are so many lines to calculate. This, in fact, is a crucial position because black has three very tempting possibilities. You could take here, you could give a check here, or you could take the bishop. And that's what Nepo did. He took the bishop. But with hindsight, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, pawn takes looks like the most dangerous move. So knight g3 check threatened. So the king goes back to g1. And now just g5. So that prevents this move f4. And black doesn't even need to castle here. You can play rook g8 and tee up for g4. And this is fantastic fun. You know, I would take black every time there. Really dangerous position. And all these pieces playing their part, including that bishop on c8, which might well sacrifice itself at some moment. Wonderful position. But Nepo took on d3. After some thought, it has to be said. You know, a lot to calculate here. Knight takes rook. And yeah, if that's taken, then pawn takes and castles, and black is the exchange up. So after this, subtle move from Ding, knight c2. This, of course, this had to be calculated very carefully in advance. Of course, the knight removes itself from the attack, but covers the e1 square. Now, a tempting possibility is queen takes pawn check. Nepo took with the knight on h2, but actually queen takes pawn is very interesting. If here, then big mistake to take that bishop. This loses material. The queen hits the rook, covers the pawn, and after black castles, then knight d2 traps the queen. So again, that's another nifty bit of calculation that had to be seen in advance. But after check, instead of checking on h1, f5 is really interesting. Just trying to break things open, and knight here, knight, well, let's crack it open. Castle's queenside. There you go. I mean, perhaps there's a way for white to consolidate this position, but it is absolutely not simple with black's rooks now connected. But instead, knight h2 played, queen e3. Good move from Ding. Still some interesting possibilities here. Bishop d7, g5. But Nepo made a mistake. He castled. And after queen g5, well, it's kind of checkmate for the queen, almost. White is going to exchange queens. Well, you can try queen h3. That's a fun move. But actually, if white is careful, then it's okay. Not pawn takes queen, and then knight takes pawn and gets the queen back. But instead, bishop f4. And that is a pretty safe move. That knight drops, and white's pieces flood over, and you can see these dark squares look very inviting for white's pieces. So after queen g5, Nepo took on f3, so he's, well, has to give the knight back, and then queen h3, and now again bishop f4. Well, we've transposed into that line actually. Exactly the same, knight d2, and this is a horrible position for black. Nepo played f6 to plug those dark squares, but well, Ding was very pragmatic. Of course, it's possible to move the queen, but instead he just transposed into an endgame. So we have, well, rook and two pawns against two minor pieces. But the problem is that this pawn is so weak and white's pieces are so good that this is actually a pretty hopeless situation for black. If that pawn is defended, then this knight can easily come around to c4 to attack. It's pretty horrible. I mean, Nepo didn't defend well, but ultimately I think this position is completely lost. So that knight swinging around here, and now he blundered. He played bishop e2, and he simply forgot that that bishop can't be maintained on this diagonal. So after some fine calculation earlier in this game, I'm afraid it all went to pot here, and very unlike Nepo, because normally his calculation is superb. And here this is very simple. So that bishop just sitting there and is going to guide that pawn home. So white in complete control here. And the game finished like this. King d7 blockaded, knight c4 happened with the idea knight b6, and that was the final move of the game here. Nepo resigned. If king c6, we'll take that. If king takes here, rook d8, or if king takes, well, that's an extra piece, a clear extra piece with a very simple win for white. So a disappointing end for Ian Nepomniachtchi. He said after this game, he said, "Yesterday I was very motivated, but when I woke up this morning, my motivation was significantly down. I wasn't very happy to play one more game." That's life. And of course, he will still be very happy with an absolutely superb tournament. I mean, I'm recording this game while games are still going on. I should say that Maxime Vachier-Lagrave succeeded in beating Wang Hao very easily. Wang Hao is obviously totally demoralised, and Maxime won very convincingly. Anish Giri playing white against Alexienko. Anish was suffering when I last saw that game. And, well, Fabiano Caruana is doing his best to try and exploit a slight advantage. But, yeah, interesting that, the two top guys, Nepo and Giri, basically, all motivation has gone. But I'll report back and let you know exactly what happened in the final round anyway. Thanks for watching. As I said, I do hope you've enjoyed our coverage over the tournament. It is my favourite tournament in the whole of the calendar, and I'm really looking forward to what happens in Dubai in November.